And then I would like to introduce Sam Daley-Harris to you. Sam Daley-Harris is the founder of Results. He's the author of the book Reclaiming Our Democracy, and he is a CCL advisory board member. Sam was a coach to CCL, to Marshall Saunders, our founder, and to Mark Reynolds, our executive director, from the very beginning of the organization, and developed the methodology that we follow in fulfilling our mission to create a political will for climate solutions by enabling individual breakthroughs in the exercise of personal and political power. And you'll see those elements today. But to me, more important than Sam's biography is that he is a friend. He's a friend to me, he's a friend to CCL, and for the next 90 minutes, you get to have the treat of Sam here as your friend and coach. And as a good friend, he will provide encouragement because he knows how tough this work can be. But he will also challenge you to reach outside your comfort zone and make that magic happen. So I urge you to be ready to jump into both that encouragement and that challenge. And please join me in welcoming Sam Daley-Harris.
Thank you, Mindy. Hi, everyone. It's so great to be with you. Let me just tell you what's going to happen. This will be in two parts. The first part will be a slightly shortened version of my basic talk. I'm going to say something about it in a moment. And the second part, which will be the longer part, will be a champion scale workshop. And the idea is one at a time. He may take two or eventually three or four of you to let us know where you think your member of Congress is on the champion scale. They're opposed or they're neutral or they're a supporter or an advocate or higher up. And we'll just brainstorm where they are, what you've done, what you might do to take them to the next level of the champion scale. So let me say a couple of other things about my basic talk. I've given this talk 25 times in 2019. Fewer before that. And Mindy, are we okay with the sound right now? I don't know if there was some kind of feedback. Okay. And the last two times I gave it live with people physically in the room together was last January in the Northern California CCL Regional Conference and last February at the Southern California Regional Conference. I've given my little talk at 8 regional conferences. This is number 9, and it's the first one that's virtual. And so I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to enlarge this for a moment. There we go. So just briefly, I'm going to come back to you without the slides so much. I love this quote. I always start with this quote by Alex Steffen, futurist, climate activist. Optimism is a political act. Those who benefit from the status quo are perfectly happy with a large population of people who believe nothing will get any better. In fact, these days, cynicism is obedience. I love that quote. In fact, these days, cynicism is obedience. What's really radical is being willing to look right at the magnitude and difficulties of the problems we face and still insist we can solve those problems. And Mindy will be able to get you my slides after this session in the next week or two. So let me just start with my story of self. Now, you may be familiar with a story of self. It was developed by Marshall Gans at Harvard. He worked with Cesar Chavez for 10 years in the 1970s. Essentially, it's what happened in your life and what decisions did you make about that that got you to this point or to this commitment. So this is my story of self. What happened in my life and what decisions did I make that got me to this point? So I urge you, if you're not familiar with this, perhaps you might work together to write your stories of selves. I have a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in music. and I played percussion instruments in the Miami Philharmonic Orchestra for 12 years, a long, long time ago. And 41 years ago, I founded the Anti-Poverty Lobby Results. And a lot of times I'm asked, music, poverty lobby, what's the connection? And when I look back in my life, there are a couple of experiences that start shifting my direction. For example, I graduated from high school in 1964, and I played timpani in the orchestra at graduation. And just before the ceremony, a flute player came back to the percussion section and told me that a high school fraternity brother of mine, a year younger, had died the day before in a tractor trailer accident in Georgia. It was her next door neighbor, so she knew about it before I did. I always say I was 17. When I was 17, mortality was an irrelevant concept. But with the funeral and the mourning period, and after the funeral, I went with my friend's younger brother to pick up his report card from the homeroom teacher. It began to dawn on me that maybe I had 17 more minutes or months or years, and the questions of purpose started to come up. Why am I here? What am I here to do? What's my purpose? 4 years later, 1968, college graduation, Robert Kennedy's assassinated right around the days of college graduation. And it's another one of these, what is this life? What is this death? Why am I here? What am I here to do? No answers, but the question's getting clearer. 9 years later, I'm a little slow. It's 1977, and I'm invited to a presentation on ending world hunger put on by the Hunger Project. And I go to this thing thinking, well, hunger's inevitable. What do I know? I'm a musician. I mean, it's inevitable because there are no solutions, I thought, because if there were solutions, somebody would have done something by now. But I go to this thing anyway, and it's obvious right away. There's no mystery to growing food or clean water or basic health. I'm not hopeless about the perceived lack of solutions. I'm hopeless about human nature. People will just never get around to doing the things that can be done. But there's one human nature I have some control over, my own, and my questions. Why am I here? What am I here to do? So I get involved in a big way. This is the end of the story. In 1978 and 1979, I spoke to 7,000 high school students, classroom by classroom. And before I went into the first classroom, I read some statements from the US National Academy of Sciences Food Nutrition Study and others calling for the political will to end hunger. So I asked 7,000 high school students, what's the name of your member of Congress? I don't want to know if you wrote them. I don't want to know if you met him. Is there anyone on this call who doesn't know this story and would like to guess how many students out of 7,000 knew the name only of their member of Congress? You could even raise your hand, or we could test raising hands, or you could write it in the chat. What do you think? It's 1978, 1979, and I'm asking 30, 25 students at a time in a classroom, what's the name of your member of Congress? Okay, so I have a 0 and I have a 20%. I have a 700 or 0, actually. So actually, 200 knew, fewer than 3%, 6,800 didn't know, just over 97% didn't know, and results started out of this gap between the calls for the political will to end hunger on the one hand, and the lack of basic information on who represented us in Washington on the other. So I'm going to go back to my slides, and I want to go through. So let me just say this. This presentation is for beginners. And I know you're not beginners, but I want you to see what I say to beginners. And so the talk has a title, And the title is Are Shouting and Silence Our Only Two Options? Bringing bipartisanship and transformation to citizen activism. And I always joke that I'm going to retitle it Are Shouting, Silence, and Signing Online Petitions Our Only Three Options? Bringing bipartisanship and transformation to citizen activism. And the title has three main messages. The talk. One is you can make a profound difference on big issues with your voice as citizens. And for my newbies, I always say you probably haven't because of your sense of resignation and powerlessness about politics, and especially federal politics. And the third main message is if, big word, if you find an organization that's committed to dissolving the powerlessness, you can make a profound difference on big issues with your voice as a citizen. So I want to, number one, congratulate you on finding an organization that's committed to dissolving the powerlessness, CCL, so that you can make that profound difference. Now, the next part of the talk are my demonstrations of main message one. You can make a profound difference on big issues with your voice as a citizen. Results started lobbying. So I'm going to demonstrate you can make a profound difference, as you already are. It started lobbying in the early 80s on child survival. And at that time, UNICEF, the UN Children's Fund, was reporting that every day, 41,000 children around the world were dying from largely preventable, underlined preventable, malnutrition and disease. And results volunteers lobbied every year, the first few months of the year, on child survival and maternal and child health and other things. And 85, 86, 94, every year, 2003, 2004, when Marshall Saunders joined Results in about 1994, at the beginning of each year, he was lobbying on these kinds of things. And the latest report from UNICEF is that the 41,000 child deaths have fallen a day to 14,520, still scandalously high, but I would argue a profound difference on a big issue by 2018. And in a New York Times interview that was basically on CCL and Results, this New York Times piece, former UNICEF Deputy Director Kul Gautam said, quote, "To a great extent, it was because of the receptivity created by Results that US funding for child survival increased so dramatically, and that led many other countries to come on board." So I'm still at the beginning end of this demonstrate is you can make a profound difference on big issues with your voice as a citizen. And I'm going to use one more. I'm going to use this, this global fund to fight AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria. And and the global fund, in 2019 was funded at $1.35 billion. It had saved some 32 million lives since it was started some 17 years earlier. We were headed toward a 3-year replenishment, 2020, 21, and 22, and looking for a 16% increase this is all pre-COVID. And President Trump at that point called for a 29% cut to the global fund. And so Results volunteers got 157 Republicans and Democrats to sign one letter in the House to the top House appropriators, and 36 Republicans and Democrats in the Senate to sign one letter to the top Senate appropriators asking for robust funding for the global fund to fight AIDS, TB, and malaria. So I want to demonstrate something else right now. I'm going to read an excerpt from this book, Race Against Time by Stephen Lewis. And what I'm demonstrating right now is to bring the heart in, to bring the emotion in. So in other words, not just, well, 1.35 billion, we were seeking a 16% increase. The president called for a 29% cut. 157 Republicans and Democrats signed one letter to the top, getting away from the facts and figures and to the heart of the matter. And I'm going to read this excerpt from Race Against Time. It was published in 2005 when the AIDS pandemic was raging through Africa. Stephen Lewis was Kofi Annan's special envoy for AIDS in Africa. This came from a series of 5 lectures. And in this section of the book, Stephen Lewis was talking about children who couldn't go to school when their parents were particularly ill and they needed to stay home to care from their parents. And then he talks about grandparents taking care of their grandchildren because their own children and their spouses had passed away. And then we get to the section I'm going to read, which is a section on sibling-headed households, where both parents have passed away and there are no other relatives, and the household is headed by the oldest sibling. And so this is the excerpt I'm going to read. In this fourth story, Lewis tells how he and Gracia Michelle, the wife of the late Nelson Mandela, are taken to a sibling-headed household in Uganda. Quote, "There were 5 children in all," Lewis recounted, 3 girls, 14, 12, and 10, and 2 boys, 11 and 8. We entered the modest hut with our backs to the wall. Gracia, with her arm around the 3 girls on her right, and I, with my arm around the 2 boys on my left. Gracia then told all the hangers-on to leave, all the media, all the UN staff, except for 1 translator and 1 community worker. I had no idea what was coming. Gracia turned to the 2 older girls, 14 and 12, and asked in a most gentle, reassuring voice, "Have you started to menstruate yet?" The 2 little girls, clearly startled, replied in those shy, barely audible whispered voices so characteristic of African children, "Yes." Then Gracia began to ask a series of questions. Do you know what it means? Have you talked with anyone about it? Do you talk to the villagers about it? Your teachers, your fellow students? Does anyone bring you any pads? The atmosphere was tense. The little girls, now fully embraced in Gracia's arms, seemed to have suspended breathing, and I suddenly understood that I was witness to the first act of mothering that these girls had ever received about one of the most transfiguring experiences of a young girl's life. I've told this story a number of times because the experience had a profound impact on me. At the moment that Gracia asked her questions, I thought to myself, that's what's happening right across the continent. The transfer of love and knowledge and values and experience from one generation to the next is gone. And with it goes the confidence and security and sense of place, which children normally take for granted. So, children already traumatized by the death of their parents are left reeling as they confront the void in the aftermath. As we were leaving, I asked the oldest sister, "Who puts you to bed at night?" "I put everyone to bed," she replied. "But bedtimes can be pretty scary," I offered. "The nights are dark. The dreams can be upsetting. Don't any of the neighbors come in to help?" "No," she said matter-of-factly. "I put them to bed myself. I'm the mother." End of quote. And so I'm sharing that really to ask you to notice that a part of my presentation, just as a part of my meeting with my member of Congress, would be what is the most moving thing I could share, video I could show, story I could tell that touches the heart about what this is all about. And so the bottom line, and I'm going to go on 2 other little pieces, in the end, in 2020, in fact, the 16% increase was improved, and it went from $1.35 billion to $1.56 billion for the Global Fund to fight AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria. You can make a profound difference on big issues with your voice as a citizen. I'm going to show one last story, and this actually was included before the election and before the insurrection, but I'm going to read it anyway. This is from a results volunteer in Dallas, Texas, and she said this: along with everyone else on this call, the Dallas, Texas Results Group has worked hard all year long on the Global Fund to fight AIDS, TB, and malaria. Dallas has the point person responsibility for our Texas senators. So when I saw Senator Cruz at his coffee on Lobby Day, when they would go on a non-COVID year to Lobby Day, the senator has a coffee and they would all go to that. So when I saw him at his coffee on Lobby Day, I immediately went up to him to shake his hand. Having often heard from results not to let go until you get your entire laser talk done, I grabbed him with both hands. He listened very attentively and said he'd look into it. I'm sure it helped that Eloise Sutherland just handed him over 70 letters she'd collected. We met with his foreign policy aide after the coffee and had previously met with the North Texas District Director about the Global Fund replenishment. All year, Yvette, our point person, was sending his office media that was produced throughout Texas, more than 25 letters, op-eds, and editorials supporting the Global Fund. After the international conference, Grace helped Yvette in emailing Cruz's office, and once the resolution was introduced, the emails picked up. There were more than 40 meetings with Texas members of Congress or their staff that year. I must say, we were all floored when Senator Cruz co-sponsored the Senate Global Fund resolution. Senator Cruz has never co-sponsored anything or signed anything due to our asks. Maybe this could be a turning point in our relationship with Senator Cruz. So if our voices as citizens can have such a profound impact, why don't more of us get involved? That leads to our sense of powerlessness. And I'm going to actually just skip through some of this. I want to share this quote with Frances Moore LePay, who said, "Our real problem is not a heating planet or rampant malnutrition. We only have one real problem, our own feelings of powerlessness to manifest the solutions right in front of our noses." So when you reach out to others in your community to help them overcome their sense of powerlessness, you are really addressing that key issue. I'm going to do one more slide and then I'm going to close. I was talking with the head of organizing from a very big group 5-6 years ago, a group like CARE, Save the Children, Oxfam, who said, we can't let our volunteers write letters to the editor or op-eds because they'll get it wrong and misrepresent the organization. And I always share this next slide. In 2019, CCL volunteers had some 4,303 letters to the editor, op-eds, and editorials published. One group saying they'll get it wrong and misrepresent the organization. The other group, CCL, is saying, what do we have to do to help them get it right? And give that to them. And the net result is 4,300 plus letters, op-eds, and editorials. And I'm going to share this slide here. Sorry. If you would like to be, and we're going to go to questions and to the champion scale part of the workshop. If you would like to be added to my mailing list, and I send occasional e-blasts, usually with an op-ed I've had published or something, you can send an email to sam@civiccourage.org, sam@civiccourage.org, and write your name and then the word list if you'd like to be added to my mailing list, the word book group if you'd like to discuss my leading a book group on reclaiming our democracy. And then separate from that, Mindy will make these slides available to you. I'm going to come off of sharing my slides and see if anyone, before we go to the champion scale workshop, would like to ask a question by either going to reactions at the bottom and clicking on raise hand, or if you have an older version of Zoom, by going to participant. And I believe at the bottom of the participant row is another place to raise your hand. And Mindy, will you or Katya call on Susie or whomever has their hand raised?
Yes, Susie has her hand raised. So go ahead, Susie.
Hi. Well, thank you, Sam, for that story about Graça Machel. I worked in Mozambique in the early 90s, and so I know of her, and it was just moving, and it just gives me the idea that that's an approach we haven't really taken with our obstinate member of Congress, a representative. And I just wanted to mention that Maura, who's on the line, was also from our group, and she was actually the one who informed me about Citizens Climate Lobby. So I have to owe that to her.
Maura, thank you for that. Okay, sorry. Yes, my question to you, and not only really to you, to all of us, if you felt that reading that story would have made a meeting with my member of Congress more powerful on the Global Fund, what is something you might do, and I'm asking all of us, in a meeting with your member of Congress? And I'm thinking of this poem is his name Dellinger? What did you do when you knew? And essentially, it's 3:25 in the morning, and I wake up because my great grandchildren are calling to me. It's just a poem that moves me about rising up the emotional level of climate change. I'm just curious, and we don't need to answer it completely right now, but what if we had a meeting with our member of Congress a week from tomorrow? What reading might we read? What video might we share? What poem might we include in, hopefully brief, in that meeting that would be an emotional expression? And of course, as we share what we care about and what our values are, that's a piece of that answer. I don't know if anyone, Katya, you want to call on?
Sure, but there are a couple questions in the chat first. Diane, do you want to unmute?
Well, let's leave that other question in the air, and anyone who wants to respond to it can do that. Who is it, Diane?
Hi, Sam. This is Diane. I appreciate your stories. They're very heartfelt, and it just seems I want it to give me power. However, I feel that I'm very privileged, and my personal story is more about care for our future. I'm not afraid for myself or have maybe that heartfelt story.
Yes.
I'm always thinking about what they might want to hear that would make them feel, as a congressperson, more powerful. I feel powerless in finding that I have something to share that would be moving and personal enough and related to climate change. And wondering about your thoughts on that.
Here's my question. You've been active or volunteering with CCL for about how long?
I don't know, Katya, how long? 4 or 5 years?
Okay, great. Okay, great. Question. Do you have brothers or sisters?
Yes.
Okay, great. How many about? Not
4.
4. Okay, great. And your 4 brothers and sisters, about how many years have they been volunteering with CCL approximately?
None.
None. Okay. So the point is, you do have, what happened to you that you're here? I mean, what does, it's not a judgment thing, but
No,
my brother's a stockbroker, my sister's an accountant, and here I am, and we grew up in the same house. So what happened to you that you are here, what along the way kind of thing? How many were in your high school graduating class, and how long have they been volunteering for CCL? And my question is, some things happen that had you make a decision about that, I don't know what that was, that ended you up here and or with this commitment. And that's the story I'm looking for. And yes, it might
Thank
have,
you.
yeah,
That's
Okay.
helpful.
good. Who else?
We have a long lineup for you, Sam. Let's start
Okay.
with Maura, who has a response, actually.
Great. Maura might have to unmute yourself.
Yep.
Oh, that'll do. Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
I just have a thought. It's not so much a tearjerker because I don't know what would jerk tears from our particular member of Congress. But I know that his constituency is very concerned about the influx of refugees. They might be impacted. He might be impacted with some really well-chosen quotes from refugees about what happened at home to cause them to leave, because so many of them have to leave because of climate change in their farmlands.
Okay.
So
Okay.
that's what I would look for.
Yeah. And I wouldn't have kind of root for you not looking there, but I would also look for something that's in fact climate related and moving. It kind of gets to the heart of why we're here. And sometimes we operate a little more mechanically after our heart's been touched and we get committed and then we keep going. But the others that we're talking to, maybe our member of Congress, haven't quite had that heart connection yet.
Maybe something like a small business person who was related to the snow entertainment industry.
Okay.
Going out of business.
Bottom line is there's not one reading or one story or one poem or one video. You know, there could certainly be many different ones. And what you just suggested could be certainly that. Thank you, Katya. And I think, you know, we'll keep going till 40 after, and then we'll hit to the other session, which will be very interactive itself. So.
All right. Yeah, we have definitely a list. It's a wonderful group of people want to respond here. Rob is next.
Rob, unmute.
Rob, are you there?
Yeah, here I am.
Go for it.
So thank you, Sam, and I apologize, I'm not on video right at the moment. How do you deal with active opposition from other interests that might have a financial interest or an ideological interest? You know, I'm thinking about the contrast with the poverty work. I think everybody at some level wants everybody to be fed.
Yes.
But I'm not sure everybody on climate change wants to transition away from fossil fuels to a clean energy future.
Yes.
And a just transition.
Yes. And so my question to you is, are you saying that in your work with CCL, you absolutely, matter-of-factly, talk with, interact with, bump into people who are clearly opposed to action on climate, or you just know they're out there, but you don't bump into them?
I know my elected officials in my part of Iowa, and they seem pretty actively opposed.
Okay.
They seem very supportive of the fossil fuel industry for some unknown reason, which I can't quite figure out because Iowa doesn't have a fossil fuel industry. But they seem either financially or ideologically committed to the fossil fuel industry.
Okay, great. So now this is bleeding into the next session, and we may just take a little time on this, and I might ask you to possibly volunteer to talk about one specific senator or representative. My question is, wasn't it a CCL group in Iowa, tell me if I've got this right, that met with your junior senator and brought to that meeting the bishop from one section of Iowa, from the senator's church, the head of the one of the agriculture crop associations, and also the top climate scientists at Iowa State and the top climate scientists at University of Iowa. Is there anyone on from Iowa who could clarify that I'm in the ballpark? Okay, yes, that was Iowa. So let me just suggest that variations of what I will call that powerful, it was, I think, the chairman of the Soybean Growers Association. And I think at some level, your job is not job is not so much to turn down the volume of the opposition and the naysayers as much as turn up the volume of those who are silently in favor, and especially community leaders who are more than not silently involved. Let me just say one other thing, and some of this is now, which is good, leading into the next workshop. When I do a training with me on meeting a member of Congress who's opposed to our issue, I have folks on the call write these 3 questions down. Question 1, I know you don't support this legislation. What would it take to change your mind? Question 2, can you say more about that? Question 3, why do you think that is? Which is a massive listening exercise, because all too often I'm the member of Congress and I'm opposed and I go this deep, and you're my constituent and you're a favor and you go this deep. But when you ask me, I know you oppose this, what would it change to change your mind? Can you say more about this? Why do you think that is? Now I, as the elected official, am going deeper into my thinking and to my opposition and the like. And I think it's a very powerful listening exercise to hear what is it that moves you to oppose this, and can you say more about that? Let's take another question or two and we'll move to the second part of this workshop. There's going to be a lot more interaction if you don't get your question erased. Katya, who's next?
Bruce Moreland.
And Bruce is going to unmute. There he goes.
I did. Thank you.
Where are you?
How are you doing? I wanted to ask you something.
You're in Northfield, right?
I am.
Okay,
Yep.
great. Go for it.
Northfield. I'm also affiliated with the Braver Angels Action Team in CCL. They have to work very hard at balancing across the political situation. And I'm going to ask, Jonathan Haidt discusses in his book, Righteous Mind, how differently liberals and conservatives look at situations. And I know that a lot of conservatives may feel that emotional appeals are manipulative, and they may react to them with resistance rather than empathy. And I'm wondering how important it is to recognize that when we're talking to somebody from the other frame of mind.
Right. Well, but there's another thing that's in play. The other thing that's in play, and I'm not talking about conservatives, I'm talking about conservatives who are my members of Congress, conservatives who I've elected, or at least my community's elected, and who are there to work as they can to represent us. And so I would hope my member of Congress, would care about what I feel and what I feel some emotion about, kind of thing. So I hear what you're saying. Now, I mean, I'm not saying the whole meeting should be about that. I'm just saying one piece of a way into someone's mind might be through their heart, and that they might kind of get me as something other than the tree hugger or whatever the heck the impression is of who I might be. So I don't know, I'm not like pressuring you, but I would invite you to consider. I mean, I don't even know what we're going to share yet. kind of thing. But yeah, good.
All right.
Let's take, if that's okay, let's take one more and then we're going to go to this other piece.
Laurel.
And Laurel will unmute.
Yeah, Sam, you mentioned having members of Congress write a letter to appropriations, a single letter.
Yes.
I'm wondering if this would be appropriate. One of our members of Congress, whenever we talk with her about climate issues, explains that she can't do anything because she's not on the committee that handles that. Would it be appropriate to ask her to write a letter to the committee? She keeps telling us that she can't do anything about it.
Is that one of your senators? Are you talking about one of your senators?
Yes, I am.
Yes. So here's the deal. I want to make the distinction between I'm this committed, which is not all that committed, and when I'm this committed, which is not all that committed, there's nothing I can do about it. I'm not on the right committee. But when my commitment, I guess I'll go up, increases from not that committed to more committed to even more committed, all of a sudden, the vistas of what I could do open up also. So at some level, it'd be fine if she were to write the committee or whatever. My eye is still on how do I get them from this committed, which maybe might not be, although, I saw the video that she sent on the legislation, which was a great, so I don't mean this specific about her. What do I do to move her up the champion scale from tell me if I'm wrong, which I'll say opposed on the carbon fee and dividend legislation and supportive of the other piece of legislation that she's, so I want to move her from what I perceive as opposed to up to where she is, at least for starters, on this other, the GROW Act kind of thing. And so that's what we're going to get to in this next session. And I'm urging you or any of the other folks that had questions that you asked or didn't ask to volunteer, because in a moment, I'm going to ask for volunteers to tell us which member of Congress you're working on, Senator so-and-so or Representative so-and-so. I want you to tell us where you think they are. Well, I think they're opposed, or I think they're a supporter, but they've not done much more. I want you to tell us what you've already done. We've done this and we've met them these many times and we've done that. And then I'm going to ask you to brainstorm what next thing you might do to move them to the next level. And then I'm going to ask others on the call to brainstorm other ideas. And then I'll offer coaching as a third party myself. So everybody should hold on. You could maybe lower your hands now. What we're going to do is this. I'm going to ask for a volunteer to read, sorry, is this working? Oh, sorry. Okay, I need a volunteer to read slides. We're going to have, we're going to read these slides on the different levels of the champion scale. And then I'm going to ask for my first volunteer to talk us through one of your members of Congress, where they are, what you've done, what you might do on the, to move them to the next level. So Katya, I'd like to have a volunteer, someone raise their hand, to read out loud of the first several levels, and then we'll get another volunteer to read the other levels of the champion scale. So we have Marie. Is Marie the first?
She is.
Okay. I think I know Marie.
Opposed. I think we can agree that the farthest you can get from being a champion on our issue is being opposed. A member of Congress or other elected officials who are opposed might say, I don't support that, or my constituents wouldn't support that, or what you're talking about isn't even a problem, or I agree that it's a problem, but I can't support your solution.
Yes, or I'm not on the right committee might be a variation of that on some of this. Great. Let's see. I think that's quite clear. We know what opposed is. And Maria, if you wouldn't mind, if I can, sorry, move my, hold on. There we are. Would you read neutral or uninformed?
Sure. Neutral or uninformed. The next level up from opposed is neutral or uninformed. Someone who's neutral might say, I need more information, or can you explain it to me more fully, or could you give me materials to read so I can make a more informed decision?
Okay, great. And I'm going to ask you to read one more. So a lot of times I'll hear people say, well, my member of Congress is a real Neanderthal. There's no reason to meet with them. They're opposed. And I also hear, well, you know, my member of Congress is really good on these issues. There's no reason for me to meet with them, and they're a supporter. And everyone's busy not meeting with their member of Congress because they're opposed or they're already a supporter. So Maria, if you'll just do this last one and we'll get another volunteer. Supporter.
Okay, supporter. The next level up from neutral is supporter. A supporter might say, I'll co-sponsor that, or I think that's a good solution and I can get behind it.
Okay, and so a lot of us say, well, okay, we did it. Yay, we're done. No, we're not done. And Maria, I'm going to ask for another volunteer to read the next ones. Thanks for doing such a great job. So who will read the next one? We're not done. And if we're not done, what does not done look like at the next level? Can we maybe ask Phil to read this one? Phil, you're still not, yeah, there you go.
I got it.
Okay.
The next level is advocate. The next level up from supporter is advocate. An advocate might say, now that I'm a co-sponsor, I think it is important to build support for this. Or, I am going to talk with others in Congress about supporting it. Or, could you help me draft an op-ed for our paper so we can educate my constituents?
Okay, so I support it, and I'm going to go be like a CCLer. I'm going to advocate in favor of it, the next level up. And then Phil, if I can get it to click here, hold on. Yeah, would you take us to leader and spokesperson?
Okay, leader and spokesperson. The next level up from advocate is a leader and spokesperson. A leader and spokesperson might be the lead sponsor on a bill or the initiator of a sign-on letter or a caucus on the issue.
Yeah, they might be a sponsor of a briefing on the Hill, on a new report on our bill or something like that. A leader or a spokesperson. And let's go to one more. This is our champion level.
Alrighty, champion. The final level is a champion. I don't like it when groups cheapen the term champion and call anyone who does anything good a champion. A champion is someone who is also passionate, that they are out in front of citizens' climate lobby and pushing CCL to catch up. They might say, I have arranged for 5 of my Democratic colleagues and 5 of my Republican colleagues to host town hall meetings on the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act, and I need your help finding speakers for some of those 10 cities.
Yeah. And so, I mean, we could brainstorm. So before we ask for a volunteer to talk us through your representative, one of them, your senator, one of them, and where they are on the champion scale, does anyone have a quick question about, well, I still don't understand what the difference is between a leader and an advocate. Does anyone want me to go back to one of these? To clarify something from opposed, pretty clear, neutral, I forget what the other word for it was, supporter, advocate, leader, champion. Anyone have a question before we move on to get our first volunteer to walk us through and with their member of Congress? Quick question, anyone?
Could you just back up a couple slides, Sam, so we could see what advocate looks like?
Sorry, and we are, sorry, okay.
Yeah, this is Rod, by the way. Thank you.
So I'm going to just reread it. The next level up from supporter is advocate. In other words, let me make up a number. Last Congress, we had 63, I think that number's right, something like 63 co-sponsor on the bill, the big bill. How many of the 63 were not just supporters, co-sponsoring, but moved up and started advocating to others, whether it's an op-ed in the local paper on the bill, advocating, you might say, to their constituents, sending a letter around to all the Congress people, delegation in your state, you name it. The next level up from supporter is advocate. An advocate might say, now that I'm a co-sponsor, I think it's important to build support for this, or I'm going to talk with others in Congress about supporting it, or could you help me draft an op-ed for our paper so we can educate my constituents? Anyone else have a question on advocate or want to see another one of these? And very often advocate comes from us. What I mean is, if you are my member of Congress and I meet you and you say, we've looked into it, I like it, I'm going to co-sponsor, they expect us to cheer, which we should, to thank them, which we should, and be done, which we shouldn't. We should then look together with them. Now what? What's the next level to move this bill along? Anyone else have a question about any of these other levels before we go to our first volunteer?
I have a quick question. This is Diane, and that's just the other way is if you go backwards, if I the neutral and uninformed one, oftentimes I feel that that's an excuse for just saying I'm opposed, and I'm just, they keep asking you for more information and you keep finding hope. And deep down, they can't tell you. Maybe it's the Minnesota thing.
Okay.
Nice, you know.
Okay. Yeah. Midwest nice. Yeah, I love that. Okay, so I'm going to leave it there. And here's what I want. I would like a volunteer to tell us the name of their congressperson that we're going to work with. Tell us where you think they are on the champion scale. Tell us what you've already done. Oh, well, we've had 7 letters to the editor published last year alone, or we've met with them 3 times in the last 2 years, whatever you've done. And then brainstorm what is a next action or 2 that you might try, that you might do to move them to the next level, wherever that is, on the champion scale. Then I'm going to ask others on this call, in this workshop, what you suggest, and then I'll offer some suggestion. So who would like to be our first volunteer? Is that going to be Peter?